Welcome to Week 11 for ED 2491. The focus of this week's presentation will be literacy and thinking skills. As literacy is a central focus of all quality teaching and learning within the Australian curriculum, it is essential to examine further how to develop the thinking skills that our students need in order to acquire literacy. This is particularly pertinent to your upcoming practicum, where you are encouraged to generate opportunities for discussion with your supervising teacher in regards to incorporating strategies for developing literacy. By the end of this week, you should be able to review the lesson plans that you have written, and with attention to literacy, thinking skills and motivation. You may have noticed that when I graded your assignments in the first assessment, I focused on your awareness of literacy requirements, as outlined in your lesson plan. Therefore, this week you will also write lesson plans that have more detailed pedagogy to support literacy and thinking skills, and you will describe, justify and critique your pedagogical decisions. So, if you recall back to when you were studying ED 1421, you most probably remember that the literacy focus of ED 1421 was the Literate Futures document, in particular the Teacher Summary version by Education Queensland. According to EQ, as outlined in the document, literacy is a flexible and sustained mastery of a repertoire of practices, with the text of traditional and new communication technologies via spoken language, print and multimedia. This means that as teachers we need to teach our students to acquire this repertoire of practices, particularly considering the sheer diversity of texts our students will engage in. The Australian Curriculum Assessment and Reporting Authority, or ACARA as it's now known in its acronym form, outlines what students need to become literate in every key learning area across all year levels. The documents state that students need to learn how to interpret, analyse, evaluate, respond to, and construct increasingly complex texts. In other words, they need to be able to comprehend and compose texts. Students also need to understand, use, write and produce different types of texts. In other words, they need to be able to create text on their own. Students also need to manage and produce grammatical patterns and structures in text. This means they need to know grammar. Students also need to make appropriate word selections and decode and comprehend new texts, such as basic, specialised and technical language that exists in those texts. So they need to be able to use the lingo, basically. Lastly, students need to be able to use and produce a range of visual materials to learn and demonstrate learning. So they need to be able to deconstruct and create visual information. As you can see, there are a lot of literacy practices that I've just discussed, and we need to be able to teach these to our students, particularly if we want them to be literate. So before we begin thinking about how we will teach our students to acquire all these skills, we need to reflect on the ideas that we were exposed to in ED 1421, such as the notion that our students come from different backgrounds, meaning that they have different literate practices and have varying degrees of competence using SAE, which is Standard Australian English, or what is commonly dubbed school literacies. So what are school literacies? If you recall back in ED 1421, school literacies are the literacies that are particular to the school setting and is part of the hidden curriculum. So it is everything from communicating with peers and with teachers in particular ways, which includes verbal and non-verbal communication, reading and writing in particular ways in the various KLAs, to all the diversity of practices that occur on a day-to-day basis. For this reason, it is essential for teachers to be able to explicitly teach literacy, so to bridge the divide between the language and literacy at home and the literacy required at school, but also teaching that variety of practices so that they become competent literacy users. In fact, it is essential for students, and this is pertinent to any age, to be able to be taught how to read. One of the ways that us teachers can effectively scaffold the teaching of literacy is through the use of the 4 resources model, which is a model that you learnt about back when you were learning the subject ED 1421, language and literacy. And this model helps you create lesson plans that scaffold students' reading ability, because it basically takes you through the stages that students need to be able to read effectively. So the four resources model is a model of analysing text that you have already come across in your previous subject last year. The four resource roles of the literate person was developed by Freebody and Luke. The model includes the following four practices. So the first one is code breaking. The code breaking is basically requiring the student to crack the codes and systems of written and spoken language and visual images. So what this means is being able to decipher the text. So being able to deconstruct it, or not so much, but being able to understand what the letters and the words mean together. Then there's meaning making, which is the practices required to build and construct cultural meanings from text. Thus, students are able to make meaning from what they read. So this is essentially being able to understand the meaning of the words and sentences in the context that they are read. Then there's text using, which is the practices required to use text effectively in everyday face-to-face situations, such as, being able to write a story, an essay or a report, basically being able to construct any type of text. So that's when you effectively become a text user. And lastly, but also as important, text analysing, the practices required to analyse, critique and second-guess text. This last one being most essential for understanding what is being implied and how we are effectively being positioned to think by the text. So before we finish up, we know that teaching students how to learn is even more important than teaching them what to learn. If we were just focusing on what information our students needed to acquire, we would not be providing our students with the essential skills they need to become active text producers or analysers. For this reason, it is essential to be as explicit as possible when deconstructing text, and we need to teach our students the skills to be able to do this, such as using metacognition. Metacognition is a term used to refer to thinking about our thinking. Our job is to teach our students to improve their metacognitive skills, because this leads to more effective learning. Effective teachers explicitly teach their students thinking skills, such as how to analyse an issue from a variety of perspectives. So regardless of age or topic, there are many opportunities for us to teach these thinking skills. Some examples of the types of thinking skills that you may use as a teacher will be what is called the 6 thinking hat strategy. This is used to analyse a situation or problem, or the PMI, which is basically looking at the positive, the minus, and the interesting of an issue. And this framework is to structure a reflection, both of which were developed by Edward de Bono, an educationalist that illustrated the profound ways that these strategies help our students analyse the world around them. And what these strategies effectively do is provide students with the thinking tools that they can use to deconstruct an issue. And that's why it's called metacognition, because it's basically it's providing them the language to be able to deconstruct the issue and think about it. So quite powerful tools, but there's obviously a lot of others that you'll come across in your teaching. So to summarise week 11, we now know that the explicit teaching of literacy is required in all subject areas and year levels. And this is not just because it is outlined in the ACARA standards, although this is extremely important, but also because our students require the skills to be active text users throughout their lives, regardless of the field that they are in or that they would like to be in. So it's really important for students to have a whole variety of literacy skills. We also know that the teaching of thinking skills helps our students to acquire literacy, and that the 4 resources model is an effective model to help us teach our students how to interpret, use and analyse texts. Therefore, as an end note, we now know that effective teachers are not only good at their craft are not only good at engaging students, but they're also effective teachers of literacy. For this is one of the most essential requirements of the modern day teacher, and as you'll probably notice within your lesson plans, it has become a major focus, pretty much on level with almost as important as your outcome. So ensure that when you're doing a lesson plan, you thoroughly think of the literacy requirements, as it's illustrating that you have considered what is required, and you're basically ensuring that they're going to be addressed. So in this week's tutorial, workshop or discussion board, you will Find a literacy related resource on the internet that you think is very useful for you and your colleagues to know about. It can be a video, a theoretical article, a research report, a lesson plan, or even just a discussion that is literacy related. It can be about the particular age group, a topic or subject that you are working with during a professional experience. Your task is to write the website address and a brief description of what it is about and why you think it could be useful. You should identify the main ideas of the document or video so that your colleagues do not have to labour over it as much as you did. And then submit your response through Safe Assignment and bring a copy to your tutorial or post on the Week 11 discussion board if you are an online student. See page 16 of the Week 11 Learning Guide for an example of the format that you need to follow. So ensure that you see that guide for further details. And in this week's personal journal, your task is to take a lesson plan you have already done and answer the following questions. How would you teach your lesson now given what you know about literacy? What changes would you make to any of the following areas? Lesson outcomes, content, pedagogy, and assessment of outcomes. Write in your journal the changes you would make and why. So this exercise is worth doing with at least one other colleague. Make a commitment to incorporate in your lesson planning pedagogies that specifically focus on thinking skills, so the metacognition, and identify the ones you're going to use and then reflect on your experience after you have used them in the classroom. What I would like to emphasise at this point is that with the majority of the lesson plans that I marked in Assessment 1, I found that a lot of you thoroughly thought about the literacy requirements. So I was very impressed considering previous years. This year's cohort, which is you guys, have really thoroughly thought about literacy. So it's clearly something that you're very aware of, which is great to see. And questions, that's it for this video for week 11. If you have any further questions or suggestions, please see the learning guide, the subject outline, Learn JCU and Facebook for further contact details and information about this subject. Or you can contact me directly via my email. So thank you for listening to week 11, Literacy and Thinking Skills. Next week I'll present a video for week 12 on teacher resilience. Thank you. Bye for now.